Let's call the Brattleboro Planning Commission meeting to order, but we don't have a quorum, so maybe it's not an official meeting per se. 6:08 p.m. There are 3 commissioners here, and because of not having a quorum, we'll delay the minutes until we maybe have a quorum and announcements for now, and get right into our first agenda item, which is downtown economic development. We have a guest from the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance, the Executive Director, Kate Traskus, to talk about downtown economic development efforts, and we'll see how the commission can potentially plug into that.
Great.
So, welcome, Kate.
Should I just scoot closer, or we're fine?
Can you pick up Kate?
She can be picked up from right there.
Yeah, or if you're more comfortable,
Yeah, you can also
sit
sit
at the other
right
table,
there,
wherever you
probably.
would like to be.
Whatever the protocol requires.
No protocol.
No protocol.
Okay, I'll just stay where I am. Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm Kate Traskus, Downtown Brattleboro Alliance, and yes, we have, as many of you know, downtown, the DBA is one of 24 designated downtowns across the state of Vermont. And we are built on the Main Street America program, which has 4 pillars, one of which is economic vitality. So it's well within sort of the DBA's purview to be thinking about what makes a downtown thriving and vibrant and economically viable. So when I've been talking to some of my counterparts around the state, many of them have an economic development person, either within their organization or at the municipality. And so I started talking with the town of Brattleboro and the select board and figuring out how we could make something like that happen here in Brattleboro. So I guess it was in January, Greg at the chamber and myself came forward with a proposal called Brattleboro Thrives that the select board unanimously approved for an economic development coordinator position, which would be half-time and would sort of report to myself and Greg at the chamber with the intention of looking at economic development for Brattleboro. So Brattleboro at large, but kind of a fine point on downtown. I think all of us have seen in recent months that many of the kind of steadfast, long-standing businesses, many of those folks are retiring, and so we want to congratulate them on that retirement and thank them for their time in Brattleboro, but now we need to think about what is the Main Street of the future. And so I think the role of economic development for downtown is really thinking about how are we building an entrepreneurial pipeline to encourage new business? What are we doing to incentivize investment and development downtown? What funds could we be seeking that could be made available to businesses? We developed this position in collaboration with the BDCC, which is the regional development entity, and I think that there is a gap in services that are provided, or at least there is a need that is more than can be met by the BDCC. So I think there's a lot of directions that this role can go depending on the person that's hired. We did post the position about a week and a half ago and are starting to receive applications. So that's kind of, I think, where we are at right now.
I thought that you had some data you were going to discuss.
Sure.
You were collecting cell phone data?
Sure. So part of...
Well, DBA is not collecting cell phone data.
Right, yes, no. We've...
Analyzing cell phone data. Anonymously.
Yeah. So there is a software called Placer AI, which is used by a lot of large retail retail chains. It's used by different cities and towns, and it does use mobile cell data to understand visitation So we have been able to sort of geofence or identify the downtown district, and we can see how many visitors, unique visitors, repeat visitors are coming daily, annually. You can even, pin a specific
Could you give us a summary of it?
store. Sure. There are about 15,000 cars that are on Main Street every day. We have over 1 million visitors a year, or was it, no, 350, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact number in my head right now. But what we're trying to do with the data is to also figure out what is the leakage there. So like when people are coming to Brattleboro making that choice, but then also where are they bypassing Brattleboro to seek other services? So to try to take a more data-informed approach in thinking about the kinds of businesses to recruit for downtown as well. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, please finish.
So in hiring someone with an economic, development background, more than what I can provide, I sort of have been able to dip in to ask certain questions and see some of the data. But as far as someone who can really use that in a meaningful way, that's what we're also looking for.
So
Capacity.
my limited understanding of the cell phone data is that really shows you that 1 million people pass through the geofence while their cell phone pinged, right? A tower that located them. It doesn't mean that they necessarily stop, for example.
Well, I think the default is they have to spend at least 10 minutes.
Okay.
And they have done an update to that, exactly that point. So now you can actually create the time frame that you wish to seek. So, so we'll be getting more accurate.
On an hourly basis, for
Right,
example.
right. But it can be used, once we, for example, the rep that we've been working with has said, like once we have the train station or anywhere that you can pin it, right? And then we will know cell data that can also be linked to zip codes. We can know where people are coming from and then where they're going to. You can use this on trails and trail data to see like where people are, how they're using it and where they're going.
With the caveat of the 2 that they have to spend 10 minutes at that 2 spot.
Right, or whatever it is that we designate the time frame to be, yeah.
And whatever the geofence is that you designate.
Correct.
And has there been any, I'm sorry, I'm
No,
done in this, but I'm really
stay on
interested.
the topic.
Has there been any connection to sales in downtown yet?
No, not yet. This is brand new to us that we are learning as we go. But like I said, larger, like if we were a mall, let's say, right, and we had an anchor store that was empty, we could see within a certain radius, like are people going to a Target and how far and from where are they traveling, and would that make sense to add to that mall, right? The software does, primarily work with larger scale entities. So when they're not going to have sort of independently owned small business kind of things. I mean, we can say pin this group and then we can get that specific data. But as far as things that are already kind of loaded into the software, it's more on that kind of a scale.
How far does your cell phone data go back? Or are you just starting as of whenever you started?
Right.
Can you get any historical data?
We can get historical data, yes.
So you could trend it over time, see what times are
Correct.
the busiest
And actually,
times?
one of the things we did find is that visitation to Brattleboro as of 2023 was actually higher than 2019. So, we've rebounded from the pandemic, is what it seems in the numbers there.
Is that, by the way, also reflected in sales data? Adjusted for inflation?
Not that I know how to use. I don't think so.
Certainly, we must know the sales data for downtown, right?
No.
No.
I don't know what it is.
Maybe we don't.
It's just for the whole town, right?
No, I don't even know
No.
the sales data for the whole town.
So
We haven't done
we don't know
economic
what the, we
development.
don't know what the revenue, the retail revenue is for the downtown area that we geofence? Are we gonna do that?
We can ask for people to report it, yeah.
Yeah, the software is fairly new, John, like.
No, that
So
wouldn't be
trying to
necessarily with the
understand.
sell data, but we could take, for example, I would assume we could take sales tax and infer what sales data was from sales tax.
I think that, I don't really know, but I think the town just gets,
I'm not a development
just-
expert, I'm a little bit surprised, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna,
because of the
Quiet.
town's 1% local options tax, the state just tells us how much sales tax it collected from Brattleboro, and then we get an additional, well,
Yeah.
1% of the 7% that was charged.
but it does
Yeah,
make
so it's
sense,
not
right? That not only would we
Well,
wanna
the-
know who sort of drives through town and gets out of their car and walks around, but how much they buy, where they buy.
Yes. So exactly. I mean, I think that is the hope, is that we will be able to see more of where people are spending their time. And following your train of thought, yes, you would think that if there's more visitation, then that sales and rooms tax number would go up, right?
I'm on a different subject. If the rest of the group got questions? I don't wanna dominate.
You can keep going unless I see Lindsay's hand up, and I'll
Okay.
put off my
On
question.
a different topic, what was the goal in applying for the Strong Town?
That actually didn't come out of my office. That
This
was,
is an initiative.
It was a planning commission initiative. Sarah Lang brought it to us.
Well,
Yeah.
then let me ask you, representing the planning commission, what was the goal for applying for that? I mean, what was the intent of doing it? What were we gonna get out of it, really?
Recognition. No, but I think there was more intent into it. Sarah definitely spearheaded it.
By the
and
way,
then
I
Sue
don't
and I helped
necessarily,
out.
if, one of the ways we measure social media presence is through impressions and all the rest of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think recognition is a bad thing. Did we capture any data relative to recognition to see if it actually increased our recognition beyond just the award itself? Was there any secondary? No.
I mean, I don't know how we would have captured that data because that's not what we do. I would say from,
There's companies that do that.
There was a marketing campaign that, that the town hired or the DBA hired.
Was it the town or DBA?
no,
In past
you're,
years.
I think that
Well,
you're
Well,
conflating strong towns and
Yeah,
stuff.
I am. Well, it sounds like I am, but I'm just bringing that up because that sort of Brattleboro marketing campaign did do maybe sort of the metrics you're talking about of, keeping track of, view times and clicks.
Mentions, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but that was for a whole separate
I mean,
project.
the thing about PR and marketing, and good press is press in general, right? All press is good press, but it's really hard to know if someone watched the Strong Towns video and then that translated to them coming to Brattleboro and making a purchase, right? Like, there's no way to know that.
I apologize, maybe it's because the Hermit Thrush announcement just came out, but I have a very good friend who gets paid based on conversions,
Mm-hmm.
if you know what that means.
Mhm.
So I think he would probably argue with you and say everything matters as to how many people you convert and measuring the conversion rate.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, strong towns, I have to say from,
I mean, there's
I
nothing
can't
wrong
speak
with
for
it, it's not a
Sarah.
bad thing, but
well, no, I mean, it's a citizen movement for kind of, citizen action planning. And I think Sarah, was pretty proud of what was going on in Brattleboro and meeting the strong towns kind of, what they stand for. And so it was just kind of a fun recognition thing. But
she has
also
every- she has
within
every right to-
planning
she has
circles,
every
it
right to be
meant
proud of the
something
fact,
to
right?
us.
We won,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
didn't
I was-
cost us anything to go through that process.
Yeah.
And then their readership is at least in the tens of thousands. I don't actually know what it comes out to be on that website, but being frequently mentioned now on that website, that is for many people and a readership of at least, perhaps even 100,000 plus people, synonymous with positive movement in the field of urban planning. and related municipal governance topics. So I would say that even without necessarily a social media attention growth track to that, I think that there are intangible benefits that were presumably worth applying for in the end.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the video was shared widely. I think that we would be able to track conversions if we had embedded it somewhere with like the click directing it somewhere else, right? So if you place an ad somewhere that then's going to direct you to a website, you can measure those conversions fairly easily. But if they've put this up on their website, we don't know. Like that's not something.
Or for example, we could look, because we now have that anonymous cell phone data, we could look at pre-winning the Strongtown competition, post the Strongtown competition, and see if our number of visitors has gone up, correct?
I don't know that you could connect that to the Strongtowns video.
Right.
Well, no, you can't obviously directly connect it, but you
Right.
can certainly create some inference and at least, I mean, you could at least tell, for example, if it didn't go up, let's say that, right? You could prove the null hypothesis that it didn't create any lasting impact if it doesn't go up, but
Potentially.
I'm done.
Yeah, I feel like I should give a little context. Maybe I should have done it in the opening, but I think Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, but even maybe before I joined the commission, there's been, we haven't done much economic development.
We haven't done any economic development.
Even years before that. So some planning departments are fused with economic development, right? In some cities and towns, this one isn't, and probably many aren't, maybe in Vermont or other states as well. So, but there has been, part of the town plan and planning process that's allowed by statute is, economic development, and is on par with flood resilience and land use and, and all sorts of other things, housing. So it could be, as equally a topic that we talk about and advise on. And we've had a commissioner, or at least one, maybe two, who have expressed, interest in economic development and getting into that. So it's great that Kate's here to maybe start us off or get our feet wet with this. I will say, and to add context too, that sometimes we've consulted our town plan's implementation matrix, which has all the goals and actions and strategies for the different chapters and different topics. And for economic development, the Planning Commission isn't the lead responsibility for any of those actions, but sometimes we make recommendations to other groups, or we can do things, we aren't bound to this implementation matrix. But there are 3 actions that the lead responsibility is the Planning Services Department. So, and they, often ask for
none of the
recommendations.
citizens committees have any primary responsibility for that?
No, I see town
So-
manager, select board, planning services department, and whatever SBAP is.
The Small Business Assistance Program. So I want to clarify. I said
Sure.
we've done no economic development.
Yeah.
That's actually not true. We do grants, community development block grants that might help out other organizations.
The planning commission's been involved in that?
No, not the
No,
planning
that's
commission.
all I
The
was-
planning
yeah.
department.
Yeah.
The assistant town manager.
Sure.
The town does have a small business assistance program, which will offer low interest loans. So if there is a business startup, that committee will get together and review applications if they make, if they're looking for a loan from the town. And then there's also tax stabilization.
Mhm.
We have commercial and industrial tax stabilization. And so that is a program
Sure.
that the town offers as well. What we haven't really delved into deeply is numbers, like Kate was talking about, where are we leaking? Where are the people of Brattleboro going because they're not necessarily getting this service here, to try to kind of attract, different businesses or grow different businesses in this community.
I mean,
So
I think-
that's where we haven't done work.
And just to be clear, I have a strong, as I've told you before and you, I have a really strong interest in economic development, particularly given what I'm seeing on the street, right? Main Street particularly. And as an engineer, having my background in data, my first thought is, okay, I'm going to go to the data and start looking at what the data has provided. And so I want to make really clear, I'm not criticizing at all the effort to win the Strong Town. I think it's wonderful. I was just wondering if anybody did anything with it afterwards, I'll say.
I mean, I can tell you that I think we are starting at the beginning with really looking at trying to collect data and use that data to our advantage. I mean, there have not been strong numbers in the past. And one of the pieces of data that we have done sort of a little bit in the past, but are trying to be more robust with, is the business and building inventory for downtown. So really knowing parcel by parcel, who is occupying the space, what is the square footage, what are the vacancies, what are the amenities within the building, and pairing that with a business and consumer survey. So really asking the public and hearing from the businesses again, as far as what are the services or opportunities that we could use in downtown. I get calls often, from people saying, "Oh, so and so is interested in starting up XYZ." Okay, great. Now, what's available space-wise? I need a concrete floor, this much square footage, this close to parking. And so having something actually, to be able to reference and use, I think will make it.
So you have the database is what you're saying.
So it's being refined. Yes, we are building that out. We have what we can pull from the town.
So you don't have the database yet, but you're building it.
Correct. And it will then need to be sort of on the ground truth checked, right? So we just have what we've been pulling from membership data and from the town assessor's office and the clerk, those kinds of things, putting all that together.
So in the agenda item, it says opportunities for the Planning Commission to engage in inventory efforts. How do you or Sue, I review and work with Sue on the agenda, but that description was just provided, and I was like, all right, looks good to me. How do you guys, how do you two envision that we might get engaged in that?
So this means looking at the data, looking at the addresses, and filling in, going door to door in some cases, to make sure that we have an accurate representation. So I know right now there's some stores that are moving locations, or one piece still has a storefront that hasn't been there in 2 years, or things like that. Cleaning up the data, making sure that we have accurate contact information for everybody. Basically, we want to make doing business in Brattleboro more easier, more transparent, more of a seamless process. Because right now it does sort of feel like you need to be in the know to know how to navigate the process.
Who has the responsibility or budget to go to, I'm blanking on the words, I apologize, retail conventions and market Brattleboro as a place to be?
Nobody.
Okay. And even if we did, it sounds like we don't really have powerful data yet that we could say, hey, we have 1 million visitors come through. Okay.
Right.
I think that the Placer AI gets us closer there, but I think the other tension, John, to think about is, how much of that are we trying to attract somebody that will be at a convention like that, or cold calling chains or whatever it is, trying to attract them there, as to how much do we want to try to grow from here, because there is definitely that tension in Vermont.
Well, and it isn't, going to a retail convention isn't necessarily going to look for Nordstrom's, for example, to take over Sam's space, because that ain't going to happen. It might be more about going to a convention of antique shops or secondhand shops, which would be very much in the wheelhouse of what's downtown already, right?
Yeah.
Or
I don't know enough of that.
Well,
commercial convention stuff.
I'm obviously not going to dictate this, but I know enough to ask questions, really, is about the bottom line. Is the data that you have available to the Planning Commission? or to the public for that matter?
Not at this time.
Will it be at some point?
I think we can talk about that, yeah.
How would the inventory, when it's finalized, be shared with businesses? Or
Well, so right now it's more of a in-house database that would be, valuable for
if
us.
anyone's interested in business in downtown, they'd probably contact DBA first, right? And then
Right,
provide
right.
that. Okay.
Or at least we hope so.
Right.
One of towards the future, what we would also like to have is something that's more outward facing. So we could have the listings of what's available. Not that we want to necessarily get into commercial real estate, but this could also be something where if we're not the ones maintaining it, it could be something that, members can populate. We have to look at what software is out there. Getting a new website for the DBA is on the short list, so that's part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
I apologize, I'm showing my ignorance. I think of downtown, it's like a afternoon walk, right? Main Street, basically, and a couple little side streets.
Yeah. Well, so the
I'm a
question
little
is,
confused as to what the challenge is in getting an inventory.
Well, there's
I could do
multi-levels.
it. Again, with my ignorance, I could walk down Main Street and say, oh, this shop is clearly empty, right?
It's more than just,
I know,
what
I'm
you're
sure
seeing
it
at
is, I'm
that
sure it is,
level.
and I'm
It's-
asking to be educated.
Yeah, the buildings are complicated. There's multiple levels. There's, some of them have been broken up without permits. So knowing exactly what is the, what's the actual commercial or office or residential space, it could be more fine grained. Not all of them are necessarily, in the current, up to current code. So all of a sudden, if you're making major changes, you might have to put in an elevator or a sprinkler system. So just kind of knowing that level
Right.
in the building.
And if you were to do that, you would probably say, okay, here's where our available spaces is, that's step one. Step two is, okay, what do we have to, what is the requirement for that available space to make it to code, for want of a better word?
Yeah, but a lot of the information we're dependent on from the building owners, so some of it's just tracking them down and getting them.
Mhm.
Yeah, we don't have building code at the local level, so it's not like we're sitting on lots of internal building plans.
And so just, again, my ignorance, if we don't have local building codes, why would somebody have to bring it up to a building code?
Because most of these are commercial buildings, and so there is state building
There's a
code.
state requirement, got it. But the state doesn't have that database.
No.
Okay. Again, my ignorance, I come from a much bigger city, so some of this is a surprise.
A couple of random questions I had. Will the economic developer position, development coordinator position be focused just on downtown or the whole town?
It's the whole town,
Right.
but we are definitely focusing downtown year one.
Yeah, I guess we shouldn't finish up, but we should, since we actually have members of the public. Do you guys want to speak on this item or later items? Okay. Yeah, so besides volunteering to do footwork for the inventory initiative, are there
Yeah, I'll walk it.
are there other thoughts that we have, Lindsay or anyone, for planning commission plugging into economic development, or questions to ask Kate about that? Or
Again, I'm very interested, but I think there's some things that, as we both understand, have to happen first, right? Before anybody can do any useful work, there has to be data to analyze, right?
And that was the thing. I think, seeing Sam's close, and nobody was in a position to go out to anyone and say, hey, here's this 14,000 square foot asset in downtown Brattleboro with, this is the visitation, this is the annual income, this is the tourism data on top of, we didn't have any kind of a package. And so I think that that's really what we're trying to build. so that we can be more proactive as we, see the transitions that are unfolding.
How much of the building that Hermit Thrush is in now do they own? How much are they gonna leave empty when they close?
I don't know if they own,
I don't
they
think
just
they own
lease.
it.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, I asked the question the wrong way. How
I
much?
don't know the exact square footage of their footprint.
Okay,
Are there any?
But it's larger than what you see in the tasting room, for sure.
yes,
Yeah.
and that's all I've seen.
It's like
Yeah.
the footprint of that building.
I mean, I know there's a couple
I
of
could
small
look it up pretty
retails
quick,
on the
but-
parking lot, but I don't know of anything else in that building besides
Right.
Hermit Thrush.
The apartments,
Yeah,
Oh, really?
upper floor apartments.
upper floor apartments.
Yeah.
There's like 3 floors of apartments.
Yeah, same things with Sam's, right? It's all those upper floor apartments.
Okay.
Do we know if the any real estate brokers in town do work with trying to, make some of these opportunities really attractive to people who are looking at the listings online?
Yeah,
Instead of,
they have their brokers,
That
but
could potentially be a resource for connecting and seeing
Yeah.
what works and what doesn't and what's most attractive. Not that you want to.
right,
get
no,
into
in
the
my
real estate
experience
business,
so
but-
far, it feels like that they're more waiting to receive inquiries
Yeah.
than going
Not
out and
proactive.
seeking,
Mhm.
yeah.
So, that's a really interesting question, because we've talked before about having property that's not getting developed because the owner of the property doesn't feel like it's the right time economically. I would assume that whoever owns Sam's building is out there hitting the pavement, trying to get it filled. Well, okay, so this is not obviously directed towards you, but we should incentivize that individual through punitive measures if necessary, to get out on the street and start filling that building, because it's good for the community. Does that make sense?
There was some
Well,
a vacant building.
we are doing some work on like vacant building
Exactly,
ordinances. That is something that we're working on.
exactly, because that's we all know it's counterproductive to have somebody sit on an empty building because they don't consider it economically useful to go out and try and fill it, right? They own the building outright, they have to probably put some changes in place.
Yep.
Yeah, I get all that.
So you have at least one volunteer here for the door-to-door.
Yeah, I
You know,
don't just have
footwork.
opinions, I'll actually do footwork too.
Okay,
And I have experience analyzing data as well, so whatever you need.
thank you.
I'm very interested in this.
Our first discussion in forever or a long time explicitly about economic development.
No, this was fascinating.
So yeah, we can have more,
Scary,
but also I
fascinating.
don't, being a new topic, I don't really exactly know how to go into it so much like we did with housing. That was kind of an easy topic and there's so much conversation around it. It was just like, well, let's modify the regs, and this one has a different feel to
I
it
have a
because
suggestion.
it's new.
I
Yeah.
think that it would be perfectly reasonable to bring you back on a regular basis, whatever that regular basis is, and I presume you have some plan. And you can talk to us about the progress on that plan, right? And what you need, for example, particularly as it relates to what we can do. Is that fair?
Yeah, I can talk to Sue about that, sure.
Yeah, we can chat about it. And one thing I did want to say is, as the economic coordinator comes on and they're having conversations with people, like we want to know where the barriers are.
Yeah.
In the local regulatory area. Yeah, we just encountered that for a property up on Putney Road not too long ago.
Well, I would assume, for example, as you talk internally in the planning department about things like taxes on underused property or building, it would have to come at some point through the planning commission. No?
I mean,
select board,
in some ways,
depends.
it couldn't hurt to have more ears and on it, or more eyes on it. But no, that's not our.
Does it
not
go
our
what,
purview.
to select directly to select board?
Yeah,
Okay.
because it would be more of an ordinance, so that's
Okay.
select board.
But yeah, our land use regs talk about, regulations on commercial and industrial and where they can be and what types, and the town plan, which we're going to be starting to review, has a whole chapter about economic development. So have some overlap with the topic for sure. Any final words, Kate?
No, I mean, we're really excited. I mean,
Okay.
it feels like this is definitely the time, late to be stepping into, really taking an active role in this area.
Great.
Thank you very much for
Well, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See you later.
See you. All right, still without a quorum, what should we move on to next? The Vernon Dam relicensing, elicits being endorsed, I think, so we should
Yeah.
delay that.
Let me just see if I heard back from Sarah.
Yeah. Guess we can move on to the town plan process.
Not heard from Sarah.
Because, so the town plan, the re-adoption of it, review, whatever it's called, mandated by state law is every 8 years, and that deadline is May of 2 years from now, and typically it's good to start a couple years in advance,
Yeah,
roughly.
actually,
So-
the document that you pointed me to specifically said you should start 2
Yeah.
years in advance.
So you really look through
I
it, yeah.
think we're on
I
time,
caught
at
that
least
too.
for right now.
Yeah, so our new commissioner, John here, has enthusiasm and to get us going on that, and I think that's great. And you've put together.
So I apologize to anybody who is offended by PowerPoint. I come from a background where you always did PowerPoint, and it helps me organize my thoughts anyway, so let's go. We're going to talk requirements, we're going to talk summary of the timeline at a very high level, we're going to talk about stakeholders identified so far. This will be constantly changing, this will be a dynamic list, it'll be constantly changing, and then we'll talk about ideally what the plan contains. And thanks to Tom, I have some additional information based on what the state has put out, and I'll try to put that in the context of what our plan states today. But remember, this is very early in the beginning, and so we'll be making changes to this as we go along. The requirements are actually pretty general. It needs to be a public process. It needs to be adopted by May 2026. It needs 2 specific elements, which Sue added to this document, and so I'm not even going to try to explain. Sue, if you go ahead.
Sure. So I'm not going to be able to do them all off the top of my head, but there are certain elements that a town plan has to have, including like a housing plan, a future land use plan. Let's see.
There are, by the way, 12 elements that a town plan has to have.
And
that's
they
a
kind
state
of correspond with actually the state planning goals. So an energy plan.
So that's what you meant by this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I should probably pull them up. I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared for this question.
Next meeting, I will have the 12 elements
We can be,
listed.
more
And we'll
specific.
document it as part of the.
Yeah, I didn't know how deep we wanted to go, so I didn't list them
No, that's
all out.
perfectly fine.
And then, did you want me to talk to the directive language?
Whatever you think's relevant.
Yeah. So, town plans in Vermont get used not only to be the town's vision for growth, or vision for the town, they also are used in Act 250 proceedings, and so it's funny, you would think that they would look at your land use regulations, but they don't. They look at your town plan, and so sometimes there is really specific language that you want to use so that it has regulatory effect. Like you don't want to say, well, you should do this. It's you shall. So if you want it to have that regulatory effect, sometimes the language is going to be stronger, which is different in most states. It's just kind of the vision, and here it's a vision and used for regulatory. So that's something we'll encounter when we write the plan.
Such as no stores in the neighborhood, residential neighborhood district. Perhaps. We'll talk about it though.
There shall be no stores in the residential
That's what it
neighborhood.
says.
Yes, I mean, but that's a perfect example. If we don't really mean that, then we shouldn't use shall.
Okay, next slide. So just as a summary, the timeline is spring and summer of '24. And these are very, very fluid at this point. A couple of things to get the process started. We're going to research best practice on town plans. That would probably also include the state town plan sort of template document and guidelines to make sure that we're following all of the necessary guidelines. We will try to collect as-is data on the current economic situation. That's fascinating given our previous conversation. That we will try and tie back to the previous town plans so that we can have a comparative trend over time. So we'll probably use a lot of the same tables and all the rest that we see in the 2013 plan, try to collect the same data for now so we can see how it's evolved. And then we'll start interviewing key stakeholders, and that may include selected community members, but I want to be really clear, this is sort of a pre-input so that we can have a sense of what we do when we formally go out to the public. I don't know, how many people have run planning processes before, but I always like to sort of get a lay of the land before I put all my cards on the table and go into like a public forum, right? I'd like to know what people are interested in, what they aren't interested in, what is going to be a trigger word, if you will, or trigger phrases for some people, so we have potential answers ready for them. And that's what this is about. And then fall and winter 2024, the Planning Commission will be working on developing the agenda and content for the public meetings. These will be the broad community meetings that are required by Vermont law for town plans. It's the town plan template from Vermont also has some excellent ideas on how to run these meetings. I think that Steve, in our conversations about 2 weeks ago now, had a wonderful idea for engaging students. We could do something that's specifically oriented towards teenagers and get them involved in the planning process as well. Certainly get their input and get them excited about it. And then in spring of 2025, we're going to start going to public meetings. Probably follow that up with a second type of meeting in summer of 2025. Just as background, in 2013, we had two types of meetings. One was kind of what do you want to see meeting. And then the second was, you're going to have to explain that. I still don't know if I can explain it properly.
Yeah, it was about sustainability, and we invited all the town boards and committees, and we're trying to figure out ways that we could improve the town's sustainability.
So it was sort of specifically about sustainability, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was energy, it was natural resources, it was lots of different
Economic
parts.
development?
No, because we don't have an economic development committee.
Okay. It was a tease. Fall and winter of 2025, we'll finalize the town proposal from all this public input and the feedback. And then spring of 2026, we'll start putting it through the sort of official acceptance process, which will include a 30-day warning and then presented at the planning committee meeting, and then a 30-day warning and presented at the select board. And as I'm looking at more documents, that may get pushed up a little bit to give us some time, just in case it doesn't go through smoothly for whatever reason. So that's it's both one risk and one potential area for changes to this timeline. Any question? By the way, Lindsay and Tom, obviously as other conditions, go ahead.
Yeah. I wonder if you envision a review of our current plan fitting in there. I know there's the collect as is data and the current economy, but besides several months ago when we reviewed the Planning Commission's role as delineated in the implementation matrix of the existing town plan, what I'm getting at is I think it'd be valuable before getting into thinking about it, before immediately thinking of changes, thinking of just getting familiar with the town plan itself. In an ideal world, we all will have read it already multiple times and feel, but.
Well, I think that's an excellent idea. Now, let me ask you a question. Would that be to, for example, the planning committee? Would it be part of one of these public meetings? What were you thinking that way?
Yeah, well, for the public to, I think, have the best input, it would be useful for them to have a sense of the current town plan instead of, but also, yeah, for us. So that way we get the sense, for example, in that document from the state, it said like, if it's been 2 or more rounds of, since you've done a major revision of your town plan may be very out of date, and you should do like this full process that we're offering up to you or suggesting to do the plan. But they say if you did a major revision just 6 to 8 years ago, maybe you just need to do minor updates this time, and it can be much more streamlined, and you don't need to hire a consultant and put together a working group and put a ton of work into it, but just make sure it's up to date and still seems relevant.
You were going to say something?
So I would say, in terms of knowledge of the current town plan, I don't know that I'd put that out to the public. I would, in kind of the key stakeholders, some of them are other boards and committees. I know for a fact the Energy Committee is looking at it now and feels there's a lot of deficiencies. So I think, the Town Arts Committee, I saw on their agenda, they were looking at the town plan too. So I think that some of that, it's Planning Commission and maybe it's our other boards and committees. I don't know if I would put that out to the public unless, somebody wants to, we could put something up on the website and people could write in and give us their feedback, because not everybody's familiar with the town plan. But I think, staff and yourselves will probably read it and say, whoa, don't.
Yeah, and that's even though I brought up the public thing first, I more meant like at the very, towards the top of the list, maybe we should
Well, I was thinking
get familiar and review it.
The goal is to try and have a session on a part of the planning committee meeting each time be relative to the town plan. And maybe one of the first ones we could have is sort of a review for the planning committee of what the existing town plan is. I would agree with Sue from previous experience that, I think those public meetings are going to be really tight for agenda time. Yeah. And so if we do go over any previous work, not to deliberately leave it out, but just it's going to have to be very distilled and very kind of high level and particularly relevant to what we want to get out of the time, if that makes sense. Otherwise, we'll have one of those.
In a 2-hour meeting, you can't present a 20-page document.
Yeah, that's all you do. But we can certainly. I think it's a great idea to, for example, have us go back over and review the town elements of the town plan and what's required and what we've done in terms of progress towards it and all that other kind of stuff.
Yeah, because there could be some hypothetical value in us going into this just with blank minds and allowing the public to give us input, but I think that's just too floundering in the wind. We need to assess it,
I think it's a great
the plan and get a sense of, are we going to aim for a major readoption, or is it still mostly relevant and do minor updates?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea, and I'll work with Sue and Steve to get it on the agenda under the sort of town plan section, if you will.
And then I don't know if I know you said this timeline's very high level, but there's much more we could do for getting input from the public than just the 2 mandatory meetings, right? We could post on Facebook, we could do surveys, and there tend to be just, often the usual suspects who show up to meetings. Whereas, you go on the Brattleboro, unofficial Brattleboro group Facebook page, and it's all sorts of people comment. Maybe a lot of them don't actually live here, so somehow that needs to maybe be filtered out.
So I think that's another great idea. There's a lot of different channels we could reach out through, right? Social media being an example. I just saw the Brattleboro newsletter came out today, right? We could reach out through that. In addition to the public meetings, my thoughts at this time are that we want to, rather than just ask people for sort of open input, we want to sort of tailor the questions we ask to make them think about the issues that we feel like we specifically need answers for. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that they can't make a general input, but you know as well as I do that when you give a large group of people carte blanche, well, they take it. So maybe we could start that at the same time as the public meetings, because by that time we should have an idea of what the agenda for the public meetings are, what kind of information we need, and all the rest.
Mm-hmm. Oscar, and do you guys want to comment on the town plan at all, or is it a later?
I'm just here recreationally.
Oh, okay.
Not yeah.
Okay, I wanted to catch you before. Sue?
I wanted to go back to your comment about whether it's, a full rewrite or is it just some tweaking. Yeah. So 2013, I mean, really that plan was written probably between 2010 and 2012, right? Then it was adopted. And then there were minor tweaks, like really, really minor in 2015 because we needed village center designation, and again in 2018 because of downtown or something like that. But since 2018, we've done housing action plan, we've done a walk bike plan. There's the farm and food system assessment that's coming out in the next couple of weeks. There's a new hazard mitigation plan. So there's lots of other plans to draw on so that, in the end, the public meetings, it might not be a whole nother meeting about housing. We might have some gaps like, what does Putney Road want? What do we want Putney Road to look like? And that will be the focus. So I think we're somewhere in between a rewrite, because we have a lot of additional planning done that's more relevant, more recent, and still being enacted. We're not a full rewrite, but it's probably more substantial than a couple of weeks.
See, that's what I was thinking too. Is we're probably going to take what we're going to go out with to the public with is probably tailored a bit, right? Because I agree with Sue. I think there's been a ton of work being done on housing, and we certainly don't want to open that up again and go back to the beginning. And that's what people will do. I mean, that's human nature, right? So we probably want to make sure that we're really honing in on the areas that we need the public input on, that we haven't made a lot of progress, we don't have plans, deeply in place, that kind of stuff. Which again, doesn't necessarily head towards full rewrite, doesn't necessarily point towards full rewrite versus minor tweaks, but it just says we probably don't want to go out to the public until we have the thoughts really clear in our head as to what we want to ask them.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Otherwise, it just
becomes I think the idea is great.
A huge chaotic process.
Okay, next. Okay, so, we were this is brainstorming, pure and simple. I don't even remember, I think, all of these little acronyms that we ended up with. Community College of Vermont, I remember, the retreat, Brattleboro Memorial, United Way. Town committees we want to talk to. It sounds to me like I probably need to reach out to them pretty quickly and make sure they understand that there's a focal point for the plan on the planning committee. Okay, that's good. And then, like I say, the public is, how we reach out to the public, I think, is still TBD. Obviously, if you have other ideas, please bring them and make sure that I know about them so I can get them on a master list. I'm guessing that at some point we're going to have to cut it off and say, well, we just can't reach out individually to everyone. But until we reach that point, I think there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, let's add this entity to the list. And by the way, I think probably we'll talk to some individuals before we go out to the so-called public meeting. But who those individuals are, I don't have enough time here to say. So please give me input on that.
Okay. We will.
And then finally, and this roughly matches again, different terminology, but same intent, matches what the recommendation is from the state. It should have a current state with data. I forget what they call it. They call it, it's not analysis. Assessment, I think. Assessment?
Current state, existing conditions.
There you go. Yeah, probably. And then desired state goals is right. They use the term goals. And then they do talk about tactics, and they talk about actions, and they talk about policies. And I'll make sure the words are clearly consistent. And I think the only word they don't use, but it's a hot button for me, is measurable. And as you said, we may not have the time to be able to do that, but I think it's a worthy goal to try. And then, of course, as Sue has brought up, we have a lot of activities that have been ongoing, and we don't obviously want in the plan to imply that we're throwing those out with the baby's bathwater, so we'll have to make sure that the plan recognizes those and includes those and provides a smooth transition, right? Involves them compatibly with it. Any input on this? Again, my style is such, I tend to power through this, but I'm definitely asking for input, okay? Do not feel like because I'm powering through it that I don't want input, that I don't feel like I need input, I do. Yeah, you've brought up some excellent points so far.
I saw Lindsay unmuted herself, so maybe she has something to say.
Lindsay, what do you need?
Sue, how is the Planning Commission been typically involved in this process in the past?
Yeah, so in the last time we did a major rewrite, which again, I think I said was like 2010 to 2011, 2012, it had been done with a town plan advisory group that staff worked with. They were all members that were outside the Planning Commission. I think the Planning Commission chair was on that. And we would have meetings and they would provide input and direction, and then staff would write it, and then we'd take it to the Planning Commission and kind of work through it at that level. So really, and then, they participated, planning commissioners participated in the public meetings. So it was pretty, they were pretty involved in the writing of the plan. At least they didn't write themselves, but they were signing off on what staff brought to them.
So then this is a bit different from the way we've done it in the past.
It is different. The town plan advisory group that we had, this group outside, I didn't feel like it necessarily functioned all that well.
Okay.
And I would say that staff has a lot more on their plate, so trying to run a, 7th committee, it sounds really overwhelming to me. That was a process that was put in place before I was working at the town. I think it was good for the time. It's not necessarily a process that I would be looking to repeat. I think you're still looking at staff being the writers of the plan. Like John had said, he envisioned it being on every agenda, so there might be points where we're bringing you drafts and we're having discussions about it.
Okay.
If in the beginning, when we review our current plan and think about what needs to be done and how much on that spectrum versus of a minor update versus a rewrite, it becomes, if it's heavy towards the rewrite, we could consider going out for a grant, right?
Yeah.
And hiring a consultant to be part of the team.
We could hire a consultant. We could pursue a grant.
Right. Not pushing for that necessarily, just saying, we've done that for all of our minor plans since I've been on the commission, and this is a major plan. It's the town plan, so if the work that we foresee warrants it, then that's just an option as well.
And it is, in fact, the Planning Commission. I was reading the state's document. The state makes it really clear that it's the responsibility of the Planning Commission to drive this, at least my interpretation of it. So, we could certainly, I won't say ignore it, but we could certainly, find an alternative, if you will.
Do the bare minimum, you mean? Or, I'm not saying you're proposing that, but you're...
No, that's
what
right.
Do you mean by
that almost sounds to me like what happened last time. There was a completely different committee, and sure, it came through the Planning Commission, so they could say they were certainly involved, but...
Well, but you have to remember, most towns in Vermont don't have planning staff, and so that's why it's like, it's, in those towns, it's really, they don't have staff helping the Planning Commission out, so.
Yeah. But this
kind of the way it's worked
is
here.
really clear about it being a Planning Commission responsibility.
Yeah, it definitely is a Planning Commission responsibility.
To drive
historically in Brattleboro, staff has really helped with that.
Right. And again, I want to be really clear. I want to make the point that I made with you at lunch that day. I think it's the Planning Commission's responsibility to drive the process. The community drives the content.
Yep.
Right? It's not the Planning Commission that's going to be making decisions on, what we want the vision of Brattleboro.
Well, we're supposed to be capturing. Yeah, I agree. We're supposed to capture
right,
what the community says, and a lot of that's open to interpretation per se.
Yeah, of course. It's always going to be.
Unless everybody is surveyed and everybody understands the questions equally and everybody,
But I just wanted to be really clear that I see my role as representative for the planning commission is driving the process, not is driving the content.
Mm.
What else? Lindsay, what else?
I don't have anything in particular. I was asking the question more because I want to make sure that we don't get in the way of what staff needs to do.
Okay.
One thing, this may be delving a little bit off the process, but it's the only other thought I have right now, which is that in that state document, one of the parts that I just skimmed through it, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. It's called it's the Agency of Commerce and Community Development's the Municipal Plan State Planning Manual, Module 1,
Yeah.
2017. They say, one thing I really like with these, since people are just so busy and, a lot of people aren't even interested in government documents in the first place, one little bubble they had on one of the pages said, I paraphrased here, that the most effective plans have a clear vision, measurable objectives, strategies and actions designed to meet the objectives. And when they say clear vision, it seemed to mirror when they also said having determine the community's shared vision and our big goals. And I know each chapter in our town plan has, a page of goals and strategies and actions, but when you look at the overall town plan, the introductory chapter, this is where I'm talking about process maybe, or content more than process, but I think I can bring it back to process. It seems like we just say quality of life, and we have 12 or 13 kind of subtopics around that. It's just who can disagree with that? That's every community's goal. It doesn't seem, it's too generic, I think, to really bring people in and be like, this is the character and personality of Brattleboro.
Yeah.
So that's something I'd want to hopefully, tailor a redo of the town plan to be a little more skewed towards and have a process that tries to capture those big picture things from the people.
So the state, when they talk about the first step in the process, is they use the term shared vision.
Right.
Right? And shared vision, my experience again, is so difficult to achieve because, of course, there is no such thing as a shared vision when you're talking about 12,000 people or even smaller. And of course, the other thing is that so many times groups spend so much time on creating the shared vision that they don't have time to do the actions and all the rest. So the old mission statement, I'm sure you've been on groups before where 90% of their time is spent writing the mission statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, oh crap, we didn't do anything else, right? So it's going to be a challenge, but I do believe you're right that the shared vision has to be clear enough that we can all, if we don't agree with it, at least understand it, right?
And maybe that process was tried before, and that's why previous planning commission settled on quality of life, because it was easier to come to concrete options when you get down to specifics, but for just a high level.
I think that's going to be a challenge, frankly.
Yeah, but we can attempt.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting observation, Tom, and I can appreciate that observation. I think we didn't try to necessarily come up. We had a vision for each chapter, topic, right? And so, coming up with, what are what is our vision in 5 elements or whatever
top
the right word
values,
is be interesting to go after. I'm not stuck on the way that the town plan is organized. I think it's really wordy and long, and I struggle a little bit to meet the state's requirements and slimming it down, but I'm really eager to try to do that and find model plans. Our consultant that we worked with on the land use regulations, Brandy, helped write that 2017 document. She no longer lives in the United States, sadly, really? So she could not be our consultant, but I've heard she's done some interesting plans before she left the country.
So just briefly looking over the state document and then looking over the town plan again, it looks like a lot of the chapters were actually intended to align with the 12 required elements of that the plan has to have. So I mean, that makes sense, right, that you would do that. You know, if you can't really figure out a better solution, let's just make sure we have element 1, 2 through 12.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. Again, I think I'll work with Steve and Sue to make sure that we get something every month on the agenda.
Great.
So that we keep abreast of it and you guys know what's going on. You have full input. Again, you always have input to write me a letter or, you know, ask me out for coffee or something. But if you don't want to do anything other than come to the meetings, you have full input as much as we can do there.
Yeah, well, I personally, I think all the commissioners do, but, you know, appreciate you taking point on this and all your energy and enthusiasm for it, so.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely appreciate it. Yeah, so maybe next meeting we'll see a review of the
Yeah,
town
I think
plan.
actually, I think a review of the existing town plan, distilled a bit, probably
Sure.
is a great idea for the next meeting. Yeah,
Okay.
I agree. No vote, of course, because we don't have quorum, but
You mean right now, yeah.
I'll take it as a suggestion.
Okay. Okay, if there's no other comments about the town plan agenda item, I guess we can move on to, you know, with the Vernon Dam relicensing though, I mean, so I don't think Sarah's gonna come at this point. So if we don't endorse it, is that fine? It's still.
Yeah, I mean, we're still gonna get the select board, we're
Yeah.
gonna take it to the select board
Conservation
on
Commission.
April 16th.
Are you gonna have to remove the line for me the planning commission chair to sign?
Yes, unless I can figure out if there's a way we can do a digital vote, but I probably need to check back into open meeting law on that and then speak to the town attorney.
Could we warn the special meeting of the Conservation
Thanks, guys.
Commission as a dual meeting for the sake of getting the planning commission?
We could, if we could get all members. Yeah, so the Conservation Commission is having a special meeting on April 9th, 5:15?
Yeah, I'm
What
sure
time?
there could be discussion of what time it actually ends up being.
Okay.
Given that there's 45 minutes difference.
They usually meet at 5:15 and they're having a special meeting on April 9th, which is next Tuesday, they wanted to see the edits because it was kind of still in process and to meet one more time. I mean, we could try to do a joint meeting and have the planning commission sign off if you were available. I do know somebody has applied for the planning commission, so hopefully by next month we'll have another
Be easier to have
appointee and Dan was unable to make it tonight.
Yeah.
He had told me that, so hopefully we'll, be able to meet quorum easier moving forward.
Yeah.
I still intend to tell the planning commission that the letter was created with a working group of planning commissioners,
Tell the select.
It was
board
just
that,
a way we were going, so if
Yeah.
it is just the select board and signing off.
Yeah, I mean, how important do you think it is in FERC's minds to see my signature on that document, representing the planning commission? If the select board,
I mean, it's,
you're not FERC, you don't know,
You
but
were-
I can't
See, the thing
imagine.
is, you were in the meeting, right? So she could easily just say, listen, Tom was in the meeting, there was 2 others of us, I believe, and the 2 other planning commissioners in the meeting.
Yeah.
We don't have your signature, but that's a function of the, size of the planning commission right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still gonna carry weight with the select board that the
Right.
Conservation and Planning Commission were involved in drafting it. It is what it is.
I would just say skip the dual warning. It is what it is, we couldn't get a quorum for this, so why schedule another meeting?
I'm so glad we had somebody apply.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too.
Does, you can talk about the letter if you have any questions about it or concerns if you want me to answer. I spent a fair amount of time talking with Kathy Erfer from
Yeah, I saw
Connecticut
the
River Conservancy
revisions.
last week. And I know, Lindsay, you had some questions about inventories. Tom, you had a lot of, wanted to make some strong points about the migratory fish. Both of those got stripped out of the letter a little bit.
I felt like I still saw a fair amount.
The migratory fish is still in there, but essentially what Kathy told me is that Great River Hydro and Department of Fish and Wildlife have come to an agreement on the migratory fish. Connecticut River Conservancy, had some comments and there was a little back and forth, but essentially it's going to take about 20 years for all the improved fish passage to take place. Kathy kind of represented that, it's a little frustrating because they're looking at their, they're not wanting to drop below a certain operating income or, whatever they're making on it. So they're going to take their time. Basically, they're prioritizing downstream improvements, and then they'll look upstream. So it's kind of happening slowly. They make some improvements, they study it for a couple of years, then they make some more, and they study again, and then they, will do the upstream passage of the fish. So, so there is an agreement in place, and Fish and Wildlife has continued jurisdiction over that. So, in terms of the natural resource inventory, specifically the rare, threatened, and endangered, they were all studied in 2016. And they were used to inform the operating levels that they'll be managing the river at. Kathy had suggested one area, I think, particularly monitoring on their own lands. I think she seemed to indicate that it's kind of operating on we trust you're going to do the right thing, but there's no teeth to that kind of monitoring. So that's kind of where that landed, but a lot of the inventorying has been done.
Mm-hmm. John, did you have any thoughts or observations about the letter?
Again, my intent was really to learn, but based on what I heard in the meeting, I was very happy with the letter. I thought it included all the elements I thought were important in terms of the ask.
Yeah.
That's really what it was about. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm happy with it too, and all the contributions I had were either explained away to my satisfaction as shouldn't be on there or not relevant, but plenty of my thoughts were included too, and all the other ones I think it's a good letter. So, Lindsay, anything from you or additionally?
No.
Okay. Well, not endorsed by the Planning Commission because we don't have a quorum, but planning commissioners were involved and all who weighed in like it.
And if anybody, so it's going to be on the April 16th. I think it's the only item on the select board meeting that night because the comments are due on April 22nd. I think they're going to have another meeting on April 21st with the rest of the agenda items. If anybody's interested in, attending, you can always Zoom in, but you don't have to.
Show some support, yeah. Okay. Well, let's see, maybe before the historic agenda item, we'll just cover announcements so we don't forget about that. Yeah, I have a couple, which is that I think you were all forwarded the email from the Wyndham Regional Commission to participate in a survey about when their basics of land use planning training will be scheduled. So it's not even scheduled yet, but that will be to be announced. And I remember from last year or past years, that was a very good presentation, for planning commissioners and DRB members. And
it's different than the one Sue just sent out, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you get it, John?
What's that?
This one was a training.
Oh yeah, I got the one that Tom's working on, and I RSVP'd on the one that you sent out.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that'd be interesting.
And so if they present the same exact PowerPoint that they've done in past years, that PowerPoint is in our now kind of outdated Google Drive folder because now all our new documents are on the town website, not on a separate Google Drive folder. But in our Google Drive folder, you can look under resources and past years. Basics of land use planning training PowerPoint is there. But they maybe will have improved it, and it's good to hear all the the narration and presentation that goes along with it and the Q&A. So so we'll get notification of when that will be. And yeah, Sarah said she went to a housing conference, a very I'm sure it had a more specific name than that, on March 14th, and so maybe she'll present on that at the next meeting. Not that I expected the announcements time to be the time for that, but she didn't come to us saying, I think maybe she said she might want to present on it, but having been to it and she didn't reach out to us, maybe there wasn't too much to present, but we'll check in about that and see if she has something to say for that and present for the next meeting. Any other announcements?
No. I do have a question though.
Mm-hmm.
Again, my ignorance. When does this meeting actually technically run to?
6 to 8 is what we've
8 o'clock, okay.
done, yeah. Mhm. Okay, let's move on to the last agenda item. At a previous meeting, Commissioner Moore suggested that we get some sort of context or justification or documentation of why there's currently 4 of our districts in town that have been, we decided to apply the historic resource overlays regulations upon. And so, staff has access to all sorts of, institutional knowledge and documents and such, so, and they are our staff, so we put them to the task of doing that.
So before we start, I just want to make sure you want to continue with this. We can't make any decisions tonight, and
Right.
then I just wonder, are we going to have to bring other commissioners?
Just present it again another
So just
time.
want to throw that out there.
I don't want to hear it more than once.
Okay. Well, thank you for saying that, yeah.
I'm sure it's a wonderful presentation, and hearing it twice would only dilute its impact and value.
It was beautiful, Lindsay. That was
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
beautiful. But I agree with Lindsay, actually.
Okay,
I mean, I want to deal with it, right?
yeah, right. Okay. I was gonna say, if people have reviewed it in advance, they could ask clarifying questions or anything, but if you wanna take it all at once, I hear that.
The
value
only thing
that too.
maybe you could just repeat for me is what we want done with this presentation. So, for example, do we want an individual opinion by the planning commission on each one of these districts? Or do we want, was it informational, for example? That was the only thing I wasn't really clear on. I wasn't clear on exactly what I was supposed to do with the information I was getting.
Yeah. Well, things can come to us by like staff generated recommendations, or, I have my own, I'm the chairperson, I recognize, and I can, steer the content of what's presented, and work with staff to tailor what's brought to us. But I feel like in the case of this, I have living in one of these districts and, thinking about it a lot and interacting with some neighbors, I have a very opinionated, point of view on one of it. So I feel like the way they presented it to us is informational and asked some guiding questions at the end. But I feel like, after learning about it more, and commissioners can make a motion.
So beyond the 4, so let me see if I can summarize what I'm hearing from you. So beyond the 4 districts that are already identified, you think there might be other districts that could possibly be appropriate for this designation?
I see it both ways. I see
So
some could be
districts may
removed
taken off,
and some could be added.
So it's a cleanup activity.
But overall, I think from what I've seen, that the process by which these 4 currently got on there and others haven't has just been kind of like a piecemeal, however people or groups have been motivated over the last decade or to get them on, that's how it's happened. And it hasn't happened with a real what does the community really value and why should we protect these different districts?
So now that I've heard that, I'm even more in agreement with Lindsay in the sense that what we really want to do is just sort of gut this out, go through each one and make a decision on it, right? In other words, isn't appropriate, and we need quorum to do that.
Yeah.
Is that a fair feedback?
Yes, but I guess there's different ways we could do it. Since we just recommended to the select board to create a historic preservation committee, I personally feel that maybe it could be their purview and role to do a deep dive into the historic districts and inventorying and give some real justification and look at it as a whole and come to us with a recommendation, and then we make the decision instead of us just looking at each one and voting.
So back to the conversation we had before the meeting started, I absolutely agree with that. I think that is the responsibility of the historic, I mean, as I understand the Historic Preservation Committee, is they should be coming to us saying, we recommend for these reasons that this should be a historic district.
Yeah.
I mean, I forget the terminology, so, I mean, use historic district in a general sense.
Right. However, I would say in the meantime, let's just keep the ones that actually have justification for being there. And then it's up to the commission as a whole, not me, to decide if all 4 or 3 or 2 or 1 or 0 have justification. So that, I guess that would be.
So
like,
based on the last meeting, I thought the direction to staff was they're gonna take the wording that has created these 4 historic districts, again in quotes, and they're gonna clean it up so that we qualify for whatever that thingamabob is.
Yeah.
Right? And then I would follow that on with, to what I think what I'm hearing you say is that then the Historic Preservation Committee could look at these 4, could look at the other suggestions that you've made, and they could deep dive into this and then bring a recommendation that says, okay, we've looked at these 12 or whatever it is, 11, and we think these 3 are and should be added and this one should be taken away.
Yeah.
Is that a fair?
yeah, I mean, if the majority of the commission feels that position, then my proposal to remove a couple districts won't win the day. And we'll just, and I see the point in that, if like, let's not add anymore, let's not remove anymore, let's not change anymore until the Historic Preservation Committee does a deep dive on it. And so if that's the way, you know, we make a motion worded that way, and then that's the way the majority of commissioners vote, let's just not make any more decisions on historic stuff, let's put it off to this group, then fine. But I would say, let's clean it up a little bit more,
Okay.
and then let that preservation committee be the one that maybe builds it.
I'm personally not opposed to going through the potential overlay districts and the existing ones and making a decision as the Planning Commission if the Historic Preservation Committee isn't going to get online fast enough, if you will, to meet whatever needs.
Yeah.
So I don't want to imply that I'm opposed to it. I'm just saying, I think for this particular night, we should probably call it a night, because what we really want is to vote on this, and we can.
Yeah. I mean, I think what we're talking about too is valuable, because maybe what's presented here before us could be altered a bit to be more clear
that's what
for
I'm
the
hearing.
next.
That's
what you're hearing.
That's what I'm hearing.
Okay, so in other words, you take this back and revise it a little bit
Maybe
to say,
I'll
okay,
revise it a little.
we
Just
recommend it
focus on
should
the
be.
4.
Okay,
That's what I would do.
okay,
Kind of.
I'm by me.
Okay. Is there any way, Sue, that you can guesstimate when a historic preservation committee might be? Yeah, I know. I realize. Yeah, it depends on the town manager's office and the select board, and then populating it.
I haven't sent it along to the select board, so I'll do that this month. But I mean, I don't know when they'll get people
They have
on.
multiple groups that have all their own timelines, yeah, and to-do lists. Okay.
I don't know how we're going to staff it. Yeah.
Well, it would subsume the
Yeah.
DRC.
DRC,
is my
but-
understanding. So I assume that.
Yeah, that's what kind of made me not have a
Yeah, but I think
wellspring
a
of
couple
sympathy
them
for
might-
staff,
well, I
because
think-
I thought it will kind of replace the DRC.
Well, but the DRC just does development.
Has less
review.
powers, I realize, yeah.
So, the other thing is I think a couple of those members are maybe terming off,
Right.
but I don't know.
Okay, we'll close that agenda item and revisit it to just have an effective, attempt at it next meeting or afterwards. Couldn't review the minutes. Should we review them, but not vote on them? Okay. The public comment period is open now, and seeing the members of the public, it is closed. since we didn't finish our business, should I ask for a vote to adjourn the meeting?
Sure.
Even, I guess
Yeah.
you can, without a quorum, you can have a vote to adjourn at least.
Oh, no.
No? So maybe it wasn't even a
Do we just
meeting.
leave?
It's not a meeting,
It
I
wasn't a
usually
meeting,
write
that's right,
notes.
that's right.
Like, I actually won't call it a meeting, but
It was
I
a
will do
gathering.
notes and
Yeah.
just say, yeah.
Yeah, so
Say
this,
there was not a quorum, these are the notes from the discussion.
right. So this public commission gathering, not meeting, is over.
Can't wait to get that other person on
Yeah.
the planning commission.
So,
Thanks,
Hey.
Lindsay.
thanks,
Have a good
Lizzie.
night.
You too.
You too.